What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wizards Latest. I'm your host and DC sports fan, Ben Robertson, and on this page, we break down all the biggest headlines surrounding the Washington Wizards. So, as always, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. Drop your comments with any thoughts you might have on this video or anything you want to hear me talk about in the future. Appreciate all the support on the page, you guys. Keep tuning in every single weekday, and I thank those of you who are consistently down in that comment section. Today, I want to talk about the Cam Whitmore trade, the possible downside of that deal made this summer. Then we'll move on to why I'm so confident Tre Johnson is going to be successful in the NBA. We'll switch gears a little bit with Dwight Howard going into the Basketball Hall of Fame, I should say. Let's take a look at some of the other great talent that's passed through DC, however long or short their stint for the Wizards was. And lastly, let's look at one of those players that might just be out of the league as this NBA season approaches. Again, guys, thank you for tuning in to the page and chatting about Cam Whitmore today. It was also something, of course, we've done a whole bunch here this summer since that trade with the Houston Rockets. Of course, in yesterday's video, I discussed how Bleacher Report has listed that deal as one of the most lopsided trades of the NBA offseason. And I think the consensus for Wizards fans and really around the league is that for not even a first round pick, Washington was able to get back a player with a ton of potential, a ton of upside, and again, for a really low cost. And I think that's a pretty fair assessment, to be quite honest. Cam, when on the court, has produced over his first couple seasons, one of the NBA's leaders in points per touch. Built like a NFL tight end, to be quite honest. He's 6'7", he's 230 pounds. He has the ability to handle the basketball, get to the rim. He's an explosive finisher. He's a 35% career three-point shooter over a couple of seasons, so a solid mark from beyond the arc. And well, again, all those reasons, I think that the assessment of, okay, you've got a high upside player for, again, a pretty low cost is a very fair one. On the other hand, there's some risk with this deal. There is some risk by adding Kim Whitmore. And as positive as I've been about that trade, I think that's fair to point out. And honestly, if you ask Houston fans, they think they've unloaded a bit of a problem on the Wizards. I've been poking around spacecityscoop.com, reading articles there a little bit, and they seem to think that while Washington, has gotten that a high ceiling type of player, they're sort of putting all of their eggs in the basket of these high ceiling, low floor kind of guys, whether that's a Cam Whitmore, whether that's a Bilal Coulibaly, an Alex Sarr, a Bub Carrington. And the only problem with that is that you got to have some of those guys start to pan out. Even if you look at the bench, you look at a guy like AJ Johnson, who, of course, was traded for, not drafted, but still you see a ton of potential there, a ton of raw talent. But all that can really be said for it, at least to this point in their careers, is we've seen flashes. It hasn't really been consistent production from those guys. And again, at a certain point, and we're hoping that this year, we see just more growth and strides and trends in the right direction for those young players. Obviously, the strategy, which I appreciate, to be quite honest, is add as much talent to young talent, that is, to the roster and see what works. Mix and match those young players. And, the goal there is if you just take enough swings, eventually you'll get a hit. And in the kind of real time as well this season, you're going to have a bunch of players trying to work together for the first time, maybe figure out their way in the NBA, which is kind of a tough thing to do as is for young players, which means the team is probably going to lose a whole bunch of games, which at least this coming season is the front office's goal, as they want to hold on to that first round pick in next year's class. So again, the only problem with that is that you do need some of these guys to pan out, whether it's a Bilal Coulibaly, whether it's an Alex Sarr or a Bub Carrington, or now here a Cam Whitmore being added. I hope Cam comes to DC with sort of the open mindset and the open, just the mentality that at least he's shown to have so far in maybe interviews and quotes a little bit, willing to accept whatever role he's put in, whether it's on offense or on defense. And, I hope he's just able to find, again, like I'm talking about with these other guys, find his way and maybe blossom into that elite type score. But the next guy I want to chat about here today, and when I listed all those players of high upside, low floor, a type of, talents, I didn't mention Tre Johnson's name in that list. And that's because I'm not sure if he's a low floor. I think he's a pretty high ceiling, high floor guy, to be quite honest. To me, he steps into the NBA with something maybe the players I've mentioned previously in this video didn't quite have, and that's his shooting ability. I'm extremely confident, honestly, that Tre Johnson is going to step onto the NBA court and be a very good to an elite 3-point shooter. And I talk about 3-point shooting all of the time. I think especially for guards in the modern NBA, if you can't hit from outside, particularly, open, any player, not just guards, if you can't hit open catch and shoot 3-pointers at a consistent rate, something I talk about with Bilal Coulibaly all the time, to be quite honest, it's going to be really hard for you to find a role in the NBA. And I think Tre's just ability to knock down 3-point shots from just right out of the gates in the league is going to put his floor at a point where I think he can only be so bad of a player, to be quite honest. And I think he's going to be a really good one, to be quite honest. And is his defense going to maybe follow along? Is that going to is he going to bring enough on that end of the court? Is he going to be able to fit in an offense and kind of get his production and be a volume scorer within the rhythm of what everyone else is doing as well? I think those questions are maybe yet to be answered, but man, I just can't wait to see Tre in the NBA. I couldn't wait to see him in Summer League. Impressed there. I'm just ready for him to kind of take his next step. I wonder, I've talked about this on the page with all of the different players that I think are pretty good scorers on the roster, and maybe not a clear distributor right now. We're hoping Bub Carrington becomes that. I do wonder if maybe it's maybe a somewhat slow start for Tre Johnson, but I do think early on in the season there's going to be a performance where he just pops off and we go, wow, yep, that's it, that's what he can be. And just can't wait to see it, can't wait for that to come along. Want to move on and shift gears just a little bit here today. Of course, Dwight Howard has been inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, 8-time All-Star, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in his career. Remember back in the 2018-2019 campaign, he played 9 games with the Wizards, had pretty much a cup of coffee here in DC. He signed a 2-year deal in the offseason prior to that campaign and was pretty much just immediately hampered by injuries, ended up getting traded away to Memphis before the second year of that deal, waived by the Grizzlies, and then joined the Lakers, where he would go on to win a title, actually be a fairly key role player for that Lakers championship team. But sort of got me thinking, just in my lifetime, man, there has been a whole bunch of talent to pass through this Washington Wizards organization, and honestly, not a whole bunch to show for it. Again, just in my lifetime, I think of the Michael Jordan was at one point on the roster. Now, I'll be honest, that's before kind of my memories exist, but it was obviously wasn't the Chicago Michael Jordan at that point on the team. And then, of course, you have the Arenas, Butler, Jameson years. Honestly, that's kind of my first memories of the Washington Wizards, and then really fell in love with the team in the Wall Beal eras, where again, something I've talked about on the page, just years of mismanagement sort of plagued those two and their runs with the Wizards. Of course, big draft misses as well really affected those tenures. You think about the number 6, number 3 overall picks of Jan Vesely, Otto Porter, never really panning out, and it really affected the development and the growth of that team as a whole. And, since that time, you've kind of had some players pass through the squad that haven't been quite the player they once were, maybe not quite in their prime anymore. I'm thinking Dwight Howard, Isaiah Thomas, Kristaps Porzingis even, and a Russell Westbrook. And I'm sure I'm missing someone on that list, but just kind of blows your mind how much talent or how many great names have been with the organization. You think even now, maybe a CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton could be the next guys you could sort of add to that list. But one of the last players there I mentioned, Russell Westbrook, might have been really out of that sort of past their prime group, the most successful Wizard. Remember that 2021 uh, season, the last time the team was in the playoffs, Westbrook averaging a triple double for the fourth time in his career. One of the big reasons really just helped will that squad into the playoffs. Eventually lost to Philly in 5 games after working their way through the play-in. It wasn't always pretty, but again, it was just kind of just a gritty, just kind of will your way into the postseason type of effort. And now you fast forward a little bit, and Westbrook might be out of the league, still unsigned before this upcoming NBA season. Kind of just something that, again, sort of blows your mind. Russell Westbrook's career could be over. I mentioned shooting earlier a little bit, and I have to think he's got to be one of the last, great point guards, all-time great point guards, really, that is maybe a bad shooter, to be quite honest. I mean, he's certainly not a really good one, especially from outside. I have to think somebody's going to pick him up either, before the offseason ends or kind of as the year, kicks off. But if not, could be the end of the line for Russell Westbrook. And if that is the case, obviously, well wishes to him. Congrats on a great career. Right here in DC, we'll keep you posted on everything Wizards related. So make sure you've hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. Drop your comments with any thoughts you might have on this video or anything you want to hear me talk about in the future. Appreciate all the support on the page, you guys. And thanks for watching another episode of Wizards Latest.